I felt like a criminal. Somali World Cup referee detained for hours, then sent back. Now he's breaking his silence. Just days before the World Cup kicked off on US soil, a referee who had spent years working toward this exact moment instead found himself locked in a holding cell at Miami International Airport, with no explanation and no way forward. What should have been the proudest arrival of his career turned into hours of questioning, isolation, and ultimately a flight back to where he came from. Omar Artan, a 34-year-old official from Somalia and the reigning African Referee of the Year, was set to make history as the first Somali ever to officiate at a World Cup. Instead, he has become an unwilling symbol of how quickly a lifelong dream can collapse at a border checkpoint. Regardless of credentials, regardless of preparation, regardless of how clean someone's paperwork is. Speaking publicly for the first time about the ordeal, Artan described a situation that began the moment he landed from Istanbul. "I had the right documents and everything. I had the right visa," he told the New York Times, his frustration evident even in retrospect. "I think they have a problem with my country." According to his account, Artan was pulled aside almost immediately and questioned continuously for 11 hours. An extraordinary length of time for someone arriving with valid travel documents and an official assignment tied to one of the world's largest sporting events. Exhausted, disoriented, and increasingly anxious about what was happening, he was then moved to an isolated holding cell, where he waited for several more hours without updates. Eventually, he was informed that he would not be permitted to enter the country. No specific reason was given. He was placed on a return flight to Istanbul, his World Cup assignment effectively over before it had even started. "I am very, very disappointed," Artan said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had built years of effort toward a single goal. "I am simply a referee trying to live his dream, the biggest dream of my life, to get to the World Cup, a career built for this moment." Artan's path to this point had been anything but accidental. Years of officiating at high-profile matches across Africa, building a reputation for composure and consistency, eventually led to the recognition that mattered most, being named Africa's top referee for 2025. His subsequent selection for the World Cup wasn't just a personal milestone, it was seen across Somalia and much of East Africa as a landmark moment, proof that talent and dedication from the region could reach the very top of the sport, regardless of where someone was born or what passport they carried. For a country whose footballing infrastructure has faced enormous challenges over the decades, Artan's selection represented something larger than one man's career. It was a signal that doors once considered permanently closed might finally be opening. Now, that narrative has been abruptly interrupted. Not by anything related to his performance, qualifications, or conduct, but by a decision made at a border desk. The official explanation: US Customs and Border Protection cited security concerns as the justification for denying Artan entry, offering little additional detail beyond that brief statement. The decision aligns with a broader travel restriction policy introduced under President Trump, which places Somalia among a group of nations subject to entry bans. These restrictions apply broadly, often regardless of an individual's profession, official role, or the purpose of their travel. For Artan, the implication is hard to ignore. He has been unequivocal that his documentation was correct and his visa valid, facts that in his telling were never disputed by the officials who detained him. What seemingly mattered instead was the country listed on his passport. This raises uncomfortable questions for organisers of a tournament that prides itself on global inclusion and international unity. If a credentialed World Cup official, someone vetted, approved, and assigned by football's governing bodies, can be turned away at the border without recourse, what does that mean for players, staff, journalists, or fans from similarly affected nations? What happens next? As of now, it remains unclear whether FIFA, World Cup organisers, or diplomatic channels will intervene on Artan's behalf, or whether his removal from the tournament roster is final. The sporting world has seen disputes over visas and travel before, but rarely has a situation escalated to hours of detention and a forced return flight for an official travelling specifically to support the event. For Artan personally, the disappointment runs deeper than a missed assignment. It represents the abrupt halt of a milestone that meant as much to his country as it did to him individually. A moment of recognition turned, almost overnight, into a story about exclusion. As the World Cup gets underway on US soil, Artan's experience has quickly become a flashpoint in the broader debate over how national security policy intersects with international sport, and what happens when nationality, rather than qualifications, conduct, or credentials, becomes the deciding factor at the border. Whether his case prompts any policy reconsideration or remains an isolated incident, it has already added a controversial chapter to a tournament that organisers hoped would be remembered for football, not border disputes.